Hi there. Welcome to NapTime History channel. Tonight we're diving into one of history's most feared warrior cultures, but not as an observer. Tonight, you're living it. Picture this. You're about to wake up in ninth century Scandinavia, but you're not just any Viking. You're a Berserker, one of Odin's chosen warriors who fight in an animalistic trance. You'll discover muscles you didn't know existed, taste mead that could strip paint, and, let's be honest, you probably won't survive the winter without getting an axe to the face. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. I love seeing our little history community span the globe. All right, let's begin the story. The first thing you notice is the smoke. It hangs thick in the air, mixed with the smell of damp wood and something else. Is that dried fish? Your eyes sting as they adjust to the dim light filtering through gaps in what appears to be a thatched roof above you. You're lying on something that definitely isn't your memory foam mattress. It's scratchy, uneven, and smells like a wet dog that's been rolling in hay. As consciousness slowly returns, you realize you're in some kind of large wooden building. The walls are made of rough-hewn logs, sealed with what looks like mud and moss. Around you, the sound of snoring fills the air, deep, rumbling snores that could wake the dead, or maybe the undead, considering where you are. You try to sit up, and that's when things get weird. Your body moves differently. It's heavier, more substantial. Your hands, when you raise them to rub your eyes, are massive, scarred and calloused, like you've been wrestling bears for a living. Which, given what you're about to discover about yourself, might not be far from the truth. The longhouse, because that's definitely what this is, stretches out before you in the gloom. A central fire pit runs down the middle, embers still glowing faintly. The smoke from it should be rising through a hole in the roof, but Viking engineering being what it is, most of it seems content to just hang around at eye level. Historians still argue whether this constant smoke exposure contributed to the Vikings' legendary temper, or if they were just naturally cranky people who happened to live in smoky houses. Around the edges of the building, you can make out raised platforms where other figures lie sleeping. These bed closets, or set, were actually a sign of status. The closer to the fire, the more important you were. And judging by your primo spot near the warmth, you're somebody who matters in this frozen hellscape. Your bed companion, because yes, Viking sleeping arrangements were communal affairs, shifts and mutters something in what sounds like Old Norse. Fun fact that historians don't often mention, Vikings were incredibly chatty sleepers. Maybe it was all that mead, or maybe they just had a lot on their minds, what with all the raiding and pillaging. As you swing your legs over the edge of your sleeping platform, your feet hit the floor with a thud that seems too loud. Looking down, you realize why. Your feet are enormous, and more concerningly, they're covered in intricate tattoos or scarifications. Dark lines spiral up from your ankles, disappearing under the rough woolen trousers you're wearing. These aren't just decorative, they mark you as something special, something dangerous. The mainstream historical fact is that berserkers were real, mentioned in numerous sagas and even in Byzantine records. The quirky tidbit? They might have shaved their heads except for a single warrior's lock, which they believed helped channel their battle fury. You reach up tentatively and feel your own scalp. Yep, mostly stubble, except for one long braid hanging down the back. A dog, or is it a wolf, lifts its head from near the fire pit and regards you with intelligent eyes. Viking dogs were serious business, bred for hunting, guarding, and occasionally joining their masters in battle. This one seems to recognize you, thumping its tail once before going back to sleep. At least someone's glad you're awake. You push yourself to standing and immediately regret it. The world tilts sideways for a moment as you adjust to your new height. You must be at least 6.5 feet tall, which in Viking times makes you basically a giant. Your head nearly brushes the wooden beams overhead, blackened from years of smoke exposure. The muscles in your legs feel like coiled springs, ready to launch you into action at any moment. It's unsettling, like driving a sports car when you're used to a minivan, moving carefully to avoid waking the entire longhouse. You make your way toward what looks like a water barrel near the wall. Each step feels deliberate, powerful. Your bare feet, because apparently Vikings didn't believe in slippers, grip the packed earth floor with surprising steadiness. When you reach the barrel and peer into the dark water, you nearly jump back at what you see. The face staring back at you is yours, but not yours. Same basic features, but everything's been turned up to 11. Your jaw looks like it could crush walnuts. Your nose has clearly been broken at least twice. Historians still argue whether berserkers deliberately broke their noses to look more fearsome or if it was just an occupational hazard. Scars crisscross your cheeks and forehead like a roadmap of violence. One particularly nasty one runs from your left eyebrow down to your jaw, barely missing the eye itself. But it's the markings that really catch your attention. Dark blue-black tattoos cover your neck and disappear down under your tunic. They're not just random designs. These are berserker marks, each one telling a story of battles fought and enemies defeated. The most prominent one, circling your throat like a collar, depicts wolves chasing their own tails. You touch it gingerly and feel raised scar tissue underneath the ink. These weren't done with a modern tattoo gun. Someone literally carved these into your skin and rubbed pigment into the wounds. Your arms, when you roll up your sleeves to examine them, are a testament to a lifetime of violence. Not gym muscles, these are functional, built from swinging axes and rowing longships. More tattoos spiral down both forearms, bears, wolves, and ravens intertwined with runic symbols. One recurring image shows a figure consumed by flames, mouth open in a scream or battle cry, charming breakfast viewing. The quirky historical tidbit that most people don't know? Berserkers often filed their teeth to points to look more animalistic. You run your tongue over your teeth experimentally, and, yep, there it is. Your canines are definitely sharper than any dentist would approve of. No wonder everything about your reflection screams, "Do not mess with this person." A grunt from behind makes you spin around, and the speed at which you move surprises you. Your body reacts before your brain catches up. hand already reaching for a weapon that isn't there. Standing before you is another massive figure, though not quite as large as your new form. His beard is intricately braided with what looks like small bones, and his expression suggests he's evaluating whether you're fully awake or still in some kind of battle trance. Bjorn Bear Render, he says in Old Norse, and somehow you understand him perfectly. The sun rises soon. Jarl Eriksson wants his berserkers ready. He eyes you carefully, like someone might watch a possibly rabid dog. You were restless in your sleep. The spirits were talking to you again. You nod, because what else can you do? Apparently, you, Bjorn Bear Render, what a metal name, have a reputation for prophetic dreams, or maybe just really violent nightmares. Hard to tell the difference in Viking culture. The other warrior, who you somehow know is named Thorvald Tree Splitter, Vikings weren't subtle with their nicknames, relaxes slightly. Good. Maybe the Allfather sends us fortune for the summer raids. He grins, showing teeth that have seen better days. Though after last night's mead, I'd settle for my head not splitting like old oak. Right, the hangover. Now that he mentions it, you do feel like someone's using your skull as an anvil. Vikings took their drinking seriously, and berserkers, they had to drink enough to calm the constant battle rage simmering under the surface. It's like being a barely controlled weapon that uses alcohol as a safety switch. Around you, the longhouse is beginning to stir. Warriors roll out of their sleeping spaces, groaning and cursing the morning with creative combinations of words involving various gods and bodily functions. The social hierarchy becomes immediately apparent. Younger warriors scramble to tend the fire and prepare breakfast, while the senior fighters take their time getting ready. You, apparently, fall into the latter category. Being a berserker has its perks. The morning routine of a Viking longhouse unfolds around you like a well-rehearsed play, except everyone's hungover and armed. Thralls, slaves taken in raids, scurry about preparing the morning meal, carefully avoiding eye contact with the warriors. You notice they give you an especially wide berth, pressing themselves against walls when you pass. One young woman actually drops a wooden bowl when you glance her way, the clatter echoing through the hall. The Bear Render awakens. A booming voice cuts through the morning chaos. At the far end of the longhouse, seated on an elaborately carved chair that's trying very hard to be a throne, sits what can only be Jarl Eriksson. He's not the biggest man in the room, but he radiates the kind of authority that comes from decades of successful violence. His gray-streaked beard is woven with silver rings, and his eyes are sharp as broken glass, despite last night's festivities. You make your way toward him, noting how other warriors step aside. Some nod respectfully, others make subtle hand gestures that might be protective wards. Being a berserker, you're learning, is like being a tame nuclear weapon, useful, but everyone's a bit nervous around you. My Jarl, you hear yourself say, inclining your head slightly. Not a bow. Berserkers don't bow, apparently. Your muscle memory knows the exact angle of respect required, enough to show loyalty, not enough to show submission. Eriksson studies you with those calculating eyes. The spirits were loud last night, he says. It's not really a question. Thorvald says you spoke in your sleep, words of fire and blood. Great. Not only are you a Viking berserker, you're a Viking berserker who sleep talks about violence. The dreams were vivid, you reply, surprised at how naturally the Old Norse flows from your mouth. Good. The Jarl nods. The gods favor us with omens. We'll need their blessing for what comes. He gestures to a space near his chair, your place, evidently, as one of his elite warriors. Sit, eat. Today we discuss the summer plans. The political structure here is more complex than most people realize. Sure, the Jarl is in charge, but Viking society was surprisingly democratic for its time. Major decisions required input from all free men, though some voices, like yours, carried more weight. Historians still argue whether berserkers were outside the normal social structure or deeply embedded within it. From where you're sitting, it seems like both. You're part of the inner circle, but also kept at arm's length, like a valuable but dangerous tool. Breakfast is served on wooden plates, some kind of porridge that looks like gray cement, dried fish that could double as a weapon, and bread so dense it could anchor a ship. The quirky tidbit? Vikings actually had decent dental hygiene despite their rough diet. They used twigs as toothbrushes and even had special tools for cleaning between their teeth, probably necessary when your bread requires a battle strategy to chew. The Danes grow bold. Ericsson continues between bites. Their ships were spotted 3 days past, scouting our coastline. He tears off a piece of bread with effort. They think us weak after the harsh winter. Around you, warriors grunt their disagreement. The winter was harsh. You somehow remember months of darkness, dwindling food stores, and at least 2 funerals for warriors who didn't make it through. But weak? The very suggestion seems to raise the temperature in the room. Let them come, rumbles a warrior across from you, who your memory identifies as Gunner Skullcrusher. Creative naming really was a Viking specialty. My axe thirsts for Danish blood. Your axe thirsts for anything that moves, another warrior jokes, and the hall erupts in laughter. Vikings, it turns out, appreciate a good roast as much as anyone. The tension breaks, replaced by the easy camaraderie of men who fought together for years. But Ericsson isn't laughing. His eyes find yours across the table. What say you, Bear Render? Do we wait for them to come to us, or do we remind them why the north wind brings fear? This is a test. Everyone in the hall knows it. As a berserker, you're not just muscle, you're a symbol, a direct connection to Odin himself. Your words carry weight beyond their meaning. The mainstream historical record shows berserkers often served as spiritual advisors as well as warriors, interpreting omens and dreams for their leaders. The All-Father rewards courage, you find yourself saying, the words coming from some deep place within your borrowed memories. But he also favors wisdom. Let me take my brothers to the grove. We'll seek the signs. If the gods will it, Danish blood will feed the ravens before the new moon. The Jarl nods slowly, satisfied. So it will be. Take your berserker brothers to the sacred grove. Perform the rituals. Tomorrow, we plan based on what the gods reveal. Your brothers. Right. You're not the only berserker here. Around the hall, You identify three others by their markings and the way other warriors unconsciously give them space: Ragnar Wolfheart, Ulf the Unhinged, and Sigurd Flamehair, your own little fraternity of barely controlled psychopaths. What could possibly go wrong? The sacred grove sits a mile from the settlement, hidden in a valley where the morning mist clings to ancient oaks like ghostly fingers. You and your Berserker brothers make the journey in silence, each lost in preparation for what's to come. The path is well worn, but deliberately obscured. Outsiders aren't meant to find this place. Carved faces leer from tree trunks, warnings to the uninitiated that this ground belongs to older, darker powers than the White Christ some southern kingdoms have started embracing. Ragnar Wolfheart leads the way, his movements fluid despite his massive frame. You've learned he's been a berserker the longest, initiated when he was barely 16 after killing 3 men in his first battle rage. Now, in his 30s, he's survived longer than most in your profession. That alone makes him worth following. The grove itself takes your breath away. Massive oaks form a natural circle, their branches intertwining overhead to create a living cathedral. In the center stands an altar stone, dark with old stains that even centuries of rain haven't washed clean. Carved ravens perch on posts around the clearing, their wooden eyes somehow managing to track your movement. The air here feels thick, charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. The mushrooms, Ulf the Unhinged announces, producing a leather pouch from his belt. His nickname, you've gathered, comes from his tendency to dislocate his own jaw during battle rages, letting him bite through enemy shields. Charming dinner party trick. The mushrooms he's holding are small, red with white spots, Amanita muscaria, though you don't know how you know that modern name. Here's the quirky historical detail most people miss. Berserker rage wasn't just about getting really angry. It was a carefully imbued altered state, possibly helped along by psychoactive substances. Historians still argue whether the Vikings actually used mushrooms or if the rage was purely psychological, but the evidence in your hands suggests the chemical enhancement theory has merit. Who leads the seeing? Sigurd Flamehair asks, already stripping off his tunic despite the morning chill. The ritual scars covering his torso seem to writhe in the dim forest light. Berserkers often fought naked or near naked, believing clothes constrained the spirit animal trying to emerge during their transformation. Bearrender dreamed last night, Ragnar decides, his green eyes fixing on you. The All-Father speaks to him. Let him guide the ritual. Fantastic. You're about to lead a mushroom-fueled Viking religious ceremony designed to channel the spirit of a divine bear into your body. Your high school guidance counselor definitely didn't mention this as a career option. The preparation, though, is meticulous. First, you strip to the waist, feeling the cold air raise goosebumps on your scarred skin. Then comes the painting, using a mixture of woad, blood, from a small cut on your palm, and what smells like pine resin. You mark each other with sacred symbols: the bear paw over your heart, the wolf jaws along your arms, the raven wings across your shoulders. Each symbol is a key, unlocking different aspects of the battle rage. Remember, Ragnar instructs as he paints a particularly intricate design on your back. The rage is not the enemy. The rage is the gift, but losing yourself to it completely. He doesn't finish. He doesn't need to. You've heard the stories of berserkers who never came back from their fury, becoming little more than rabid animals until their own people had to put them down. The mushrooms taste like dirt and disappointment. You chew them slowly, as instructed, letting the bitter juice coat your mouth. Around you, your brothers do the same, their faces scrunching at the flavor. For supposed divine warriors, you all look remarkably like kids being forced to eat vegetables. But then the effects start. First, it's just a warmth spreading from your stomach, like you've drunk strong mead on an empty stomach. Colors become more vivid. The green of the leaves almost hurts to look at. Sounds layer and separate. You can hear each individual bird call, each whisper of wind through branches, each heartbeat of your brothers. The drum, you hear yourself say, and Ulf produces a small hand drum from seemingly nowhere. The rhythm starts slow, matching your heartbeat, then gradually increases. Your body wants to move, needs to move. The painted symbols on your skin begin to feel hot, like brands. This is the mainstream historical fact. Berserkers entered a trance-like state before battle, working themselves into a frenzy through ritual and possibly chemical means. What the sagas don't tell you is how it feels from the inside, like something massive and primal is trying to claw its way out through your skin. Your brothers begin to chant, low and guttural sounds that bypass language and speak directly to something older in your brain. You find yourself joining in, the sounds torn from your throat without conscious thought. The forest spins. No, you're spinning, dancing around the altar stone in movements that feel both foreign and utterly natural. The bear is coming. You can feel it prowling at the edges of your consciousness, testing the boundaries between man and beast. Your vision starts to shift, colors fade, but movement becomes crystal clear. Your hearing sharpens to predatory perfection. The human thoughts, worry, fear, self-consciousness begin to fade, replaced by something simpler, hunger, rage, the need to rend and tear. Hold the line. Ragnar's voice cuts through the building frenzy. See, but don't become. We seek wisdom, not blood. Not yet. The training ground sits behind the longhouse, a patch of beaten earth stained with sweat, blood, and the occasional tooth. As the mushroom effects fade to a manageable buzz, Ragnar leads your group back to prepare for what he calls channeling practice. Apparently, going full berserkers without proper direction is like firing a cannon in a small room. Spectacular, but you probably won't enjoy the results. Young warriors have already gathered, forming a rough circle around the practice space. They watch you with a mixture of awe and nervousness, like kids at the zoo wondering if the tiger's cage is really secure. You notice money changing hands. They're betting on today's demonstrations. Vikings loved gambling almost as much as they loved violence, which made berserker training sessions prime entertainment. Today, Ragnar announces, addressing both you and the crowd, we remind our bodies how to ride the rage, not be ridden by it. And he points to a series of training posts wrapped in leather and stuffed with straw. Bear render, you're new to controlling the shift. Show us where you are. The mainstream historical fact is that Viking warriors trained constantly, maintaining their edge between raids. But Berserker training was different. It was as much about control as strength. You had to learn to summon the rage on command, direct it effectively, and, crucially, come back from it when the battle ended. You step into the circle, feeling the weight of expectations. The residual mushroom effects make everything slightly sharper, more immediate. Ulf tosses you a practice sword, blunted but still heavy enough to break bones if you're not careful. The weight feels good in your hand, familiar. Find the bear, Ragnar instructs, but keep one hand on its chain. You close your eyes, reaching for that primal feeling from the grove. It's there, waiting, like a sleeping giant in your chest. You begin to move, slowly at first, letting your body remember its training. The sword cuts through air in basic patterns: overhead strikes, lateral sweeps, defensive parries. Muscle memory from a life you didn't live takes over. Faster, Ragnar commands. You accelerate, and something shifts. The bear stirs, your breathing deepens, becomes rhythmic grunting. The practice sword feels lighter. You strike the first training post, and the impact reverberates up your arm, satisfying, but not enough, never enough. Let it rise. Ragnar's voice seems to come from very far away. But you hold the leash. The transformation isn't like in movies. No dramatic morphing or CGI effects. It's more like someone slowly turning up the volume on every aggressive instinct you've ever had. Your vision tunnels, focusing only on what's directly in front of you. Your hearing changes, filtering out everything except movement and breathing. The practice post isn't a post anymore. It's an enemy, and enemies need to die. Your strikes become devastating. The leather wrapping splits, spilling straw. Splinters fly from the wooden core. Around you, the younger warriors step back, their excited chatter dying away. This isn't training anymore. This is barely controlled violence. Thunder strike, someone shouts, using the name for a particularly brutal overhead blow, and you deliver it without thinking. The practice post cracks, top half hanging at an angle. You spin to the next target, saliva dripping from your mouth. When did you start drooling? And launch into a combination that would turn a human opponent into scattered pieces. Here's the quirky tidbit historians rarely mention. Berserkers often bit their shields during combat, partly from rage and partly as an intimidation tactic. You find yourself gnawing on the edge of your practice sword between strikes, teeth grinding against the blunted metal. The taste of iron fills your mouth. Did you bite your tongue, or is that just part of the experience? Enough. Ragnar's command cuts through the rage like cold water. Return to yourself. Bear render. The bear has shown its strength. Now show your control. This is the hard part. Every fiber of your being wants to continue, to destroy every target in sight, and then find more. The younger warriors look like prey now, their fear scent sharp in your nostrils. It would be so easy to turn on them, to paint the practice ground properly red. You force yourself to stillness, gasping air like a drowning man. The sword drops from nerveless fingers. Your legs shake, not from exhaustion, but from fighting your own instincts. Slowly, painfully, you pull the human thoughts back to the surface. You are Bjorn Bear Render. You are a warrior, not a beast. You serve Jarl Eriksson. These are your people, not your prey. Good, Ragnar approves, though sweat beads his forehead. He was ready to intervene if you'd lost control completely. The first lesson is always the hardest. The bear is strong in you, maybe too strong. We'll need to work on your anchors. Anchors, you learn, are mental touchstones berserkers use to pull themselves back. Some focus on family, others on oaths of loyalty. Ulf shows you his, a small carved wooden wolf worn around his neck, supposedly blessed by his mother. When the rage threatens to take me completely, he explains, I hold this, and remember I'm a man who chooses to be a wolf, not a wolf pretending to be a man. The training continues for hours. You learn to gauge the different levels of transformation, from the light battle focus that sharpens reflexes to the full bear rage that turns you into a whirlwind of destruction. Historians still argue whether berserkers could actually control their transformations or if the sagas exaggerate. From your experience, it's less about control and more about negotiation, making deals with the beast inside about when it gets to come out to play. Life in a Viking settlement follows rhythms as predictable as the tides, if the tides occasionally involved ritual sacrifice and competitive drinking. After your morning training session, your ravenous, berserker metabolism, it turns out, burns through food like a forge through coal. The midday meal is being prepared in the longhouse, and your nose guides you back through clouds of smoke and the press of daily activities. The social hierarchy reveals itself in 1,000 small ways. Thralls scatter when you approach. Free farmers nod respectfully, but maintain distance, while fellow warriors greet you with casual violence, shoulder checks, mock punches, the occasional headlock. It's like being back in the world's most dangerous fraternity, where hazing might actually kill you. Bear Render, a massive hand claps your shoulder hard enough to stagger a normal man. It's Gunnar Skullcrusher, grinning through his magnificent beard. Heard you nearly ate young Olaf during practice. He's still shaking like a leaf in a storm. You grunt something non-committal, settling onto a bench near the fire. The meal is typical Viking fare, mysterious stew that could contain anything from horse to last week's leftovers, hard bread that doubles as construction material, and fermented shark that smells like someone weaponized a latrine. The quirky historical tidbit? Vikings actually had sophisticated preservation techniques. That fermented shark, hakarl, could last months without refrigeration, though whether anyone would want to eat it after that long is another question. The thralls gossip. Another warrior chimes in, Eric Serpent Tongue, whose nickname comes from his ability to talk his way out of or into any situation. They say the Danes offer 3 pounds of silver for a berserker's head. Only 3? You respond, surprising yourself with the joke. I'm insulted. Ragnar's worth at least 5. The table erupts in laughter. Ragnar himself grins from across the fire. The bear shows humor. Perhaps there's hope for you yet, young one. The mainstream historical fact that surprises most people is how much Vikings valued wit and wordplay. Their culture places clever insults, flighting, as much as martial prowess. A warrior who could destroy opponents verbally before destroying them physically earned double respect. Personal hygiene becomes your next challenge. Vikings, contrary to popular belief, were actually quite vain about their appearance. Saturday was washing day, lagerdager, literally washing day, and everyone was expected to participate. The bathhouse is a separate building, thick with steam from water poured over hot stones. You strip down with the others, noting how even hardened warriors turn self-conscious about their scars in this setting. That's new, Thorvald observes, pointing to a fresh scar across your ribs you don't remember getting. From the Wessex raid? You nod, pretending to remember. Your body is a map of violence you didn't commit, each mark telling a story you have to piece together from context. The hot water stings every cut and scrape from training, but it's also remarkably soothing. Vikings added herbs to their bath water, birch leaves for cleaning, meadow sweet for scent. It's like a medieval spa day. If spa days occasionally featured competitive breath-holding contests that ended with someone passing out, the combs come out next. Vikings were obsessed with their hair, and even your mostly shaved berserker head requires maintenance. That single long braid needs attention, and Ulf shows you how to work bone combs through it, adding small bronze rings at intervals. Each ring is a battle survived, he explains. When you die, the Valkyries count them to know your worth. Beard maintenance is serious business. Despite the wild appearance, Viking beards were carefully groomed. You watch Gunnar work oil through his magnificent face forest, braiding sections with practiced ease. Some warriors bleach their beards with lye, a fashion statement that also kills lice. Multifunctional fashion at its finest. Historians still argue whether Vikings wore eye makeup, but in your settlement, several warriors definitely rim their eyes with kohl. Helps with snow glare, Eric claims, though you suspect it's more about looking intimidating. When you catch your reflection in a polished metal surface, you have to admit the effect works. You look like something that crawled out of a nightmare and decided to accessorize. The afternoon brings weapon maintenance. Your personal arsenal, you discover, is extensive. A two-handed axe named Bone Biter, because of course it has a name. Several throwing axes, a sword that cost more than most farms, and multiple knives hidden everywhere from boot to belt. Each weapon requires cleaning, sharpening, and careful inspection for damage. A dull blade is a dead warrior, intones the weapon master, an ancient man missing 3 fingers, but still deadly with the ones he has left. He shows you how to use whetstones properly, the exact angle for different edges, how to oil blades to prevent rust. It's meditative work, the repetitive motions calming after the morning's violent exertions. The younger warriors gather to watch you work, whispering among themselves. You're a celebrity of sorts. Berserkers are rare enough that many have never seen one up close. One brave boy, maybe 13, approaches with a practiced sword. Lord Bear Render, he stammers, would you show me the heaven strike pattern? You could refuse. Berserkers aren't teachers. But something in his eager face reminds you of something. A brother? A son? The memories are hazy. You spend an hour teaching him basic moves, careful to control your strength. His joy when he successfully completes the pattern is infectious. Even hardened killers, apparently, can't resist hero worship from kids. The religious life of a Viking berserker is complicated, to put it mildly. As evening approaches, the entire settlement prepares for the weekly blot, a sacrifice to the gods that's part barbecue, part theater, and part group therapy session. You find yourself in the awkward position of being both congregation and clergy, since berserkers serve as direct conduits to Odin himself. The temple, such as it is, sits on a hill overlooking the settlement. It's more of an elaborate wooden hall than what modern minds picture as a temple, but the carved pillars depicting scenes from the sagas and the distinctive smell of old blood mark it as sacred space. The Gothi, priest, is already there, preparing the altar. He's a fascinating contradiction, wearing enough gold to fund a small raid, but with the calloused hands of someone who still swings an axe when needed. Bare render, he greets you with careful respect. Priests and berserkers have an interesting relationship in Viking society. You're both servants of the gods, but while he interprets divine will through runes and ritual, you embody it through violence. It's like being co-workers with very different job descriptions. The quirky historical detail most people miss: Viking paganism was incredibly transactional. You didn't worship the gods hoping for abstract spiritual enlightenment. You made specific deals. I'll sacrifice this prize bull if you give us good wins for raiding. Here's some quality mead. Now how about keeping the harvest frost free? The gods were less omnipotent deities and more like powerful neighbors you needed to keep happy. The sacrificial animal tonight is a horse, a massive stallion that probably cost more than most warriors make in a year. The mainstream historical record confirms that horse sacrifice was the premium offering in Norse paganism. You can't help but feel a twinge of modern sensibility watching the beautiful animal being led to the altar. But your Viking persona sees only honor. This horse will carry messages to Odin himself. The berserkers will hold him, the Gothi announces, and you step forward with your brothers. This is part of your role. You're strong enough to keep the animal still and spiritually pure enough to touch the sacrifice without contaminating it. The horse seems to sense something, eyes rolling white, but between the four of you, it has no chance of escape. The actual sacrifice is swift and practiced. The Gothi's blade finds the artery perfectly, and the blood flows into carved wooden bowls. What happens next would definitely upset modern sensibilities. The blood is sprinkled on the altar, the temple walls, and yes, the congregation. You receive an extra generous splash across your face and chest, marking you as Odin's own. It's warm and metallic, and thoroughly disturbing to your 21st century mind, hiding underneath the Viking exterior. The All-Father watches, the Gothi cries, reading signs in the way the blood pools. He sees his bears preparing for glory. The ravens are hungry, and they shall feast. The crowd erupts in cheers. Vikings loved a good omen, like they loved good mead, enthusiastically and in large quantities. The horse is quickly butchered, with choice portions set aside for the gods, which means burned on the altar, and the rest prepared for the feast. Waste not, want not, even in religious fervor, but your spiritual duties aren't done. As a berserker, you have a special connection to Odin, the god of war, wisdom, and death. While others celebrate, Ragnar pulls you aside. Tonight, you learn the deep mysteries, he says quietly, the things not spoken of in the common hall. He leads you to a smaller chamber behind the main temple, where the walls are covered in runic inscriptions that hurt to look at directly. Here, the cheerful violence of the public religion gives way to something older and stranger. Historians still argue whether berserkers practiced a form of shamanism alongside mainstream Norse paganism, and standing in this dark room, you're pretty sure they did. Odin hung himself on the world tree for 9 days to gain wisdom, Ragnar intones, lighting herbs that fill the room with sweet smoke. We hang ourselves on the tree of rage to gain power, but the price is always paid. He shows you scars you hadn't noticed before, not battle wounds, but deliberate cuts in specific patterns. Each time we call the bear, we give a piece of ourselves to the All-Father. Some give blood, some give sanity, some give their humanity entire. The god is generous, but never free. The ritual that follows is impossible to describe coherently. There's chanting in languages that predate Old Norse, positions that make your joints scream, breathing exercises that leave you dizzy. At some point, you're hanging upside down from roof beams, blood rushing to your head, while Ragnar carves small runes into your shoulders. The pain is extraordinary, but underneath it, something else, a connection to something vast and utterly inhuman. Do you see? Ragnar asks, and you do. Visions flash behind your eyelids, battlefields you've never visited, enemies you've never faced, a one-eyed figure watching from a throne made of spears. The bear inside you isn't just a metaphor or a psychological state, it's a literal spirit, gifted by Odin, that shares your body. The cost of hosting it is everything that makes you purely human. When they finally cut you down, you understand why berserkers rarely live to old age. It's not just the battles, it's the constant erosion of self, feeding pieces of your soul to maintain the connection to divine rage. No wonder the other warriors treat you with such careful respect. You're already half dead, halfway between Midgard and Valhalla, a walking doorway between worlds. The morning of departure arrives with all the subtlety of a war horn. The entire settlement transforms into organized chaos as 3 longships prepare for the summer raids. You stand at the harbor, watching controlled mayhem unfold as weapons, supplies, and increasingly drunk warriors flow toward the vessels. Your ship, the Raven's Hunger, sits lowest in the water, already heavy with supplies, but built to carry 30 warriors and whatever wealth you'll liberate from unsuspecting monasteries. Loading a Viking longship is an art form. Everything has its place. From the massive water barrels lashed amidships to the spare sail carefully folded in waterproof sealskin, you help haul aboard what seems like half a forest worth of firewood, countless sacks of the world's hardest bread, and enough dried fish to build a small house. The quirky historical detail: Vikings packed surprisingly well. Archaeological evidence shows they even brought gaming boards and dice for entertainment during long voyages. Nothing says hardened raider like getting genuinely upset about losing at Hanefatafel. Bear render, your chest goes here, shouts the ship's captain, a weather-beaten man named Hakon Seawolf. He points to a specific spot near your rowing bench. Personal belongings are minimal: a spare set of clothes, your weapons, and whatever religious items you can't live without. Your chest contains an interesting mix: whetstones, a spare axe head, what appears to be a collection of teeth, trophies, spares, and surprisingly, a small carved wooden bear that looks like a child made it. The weapons blessing is serious business. The Gothi arrives with his assistants, carrying bowls of blood saved from last night's sacrifice. Each weapon is marked with runes drawn in blood, while the Gothi chants prayers that sound like he's trying to gargle rocks. Your axe, Bonebiter, receives special attention. As a berserker's weapon, it's considered semi-divine, a physical extension of Odin's rage. May your edge never dull, may your weight never tire the arm that bears you, the Gothian tones, tracing symbols that seem to shimmer before soaking into the metal. May you drink deep and often. The mainstream historical fact is that Vikings absolutely believed in lucky weapons. Swords and axes were passed down through generations, accumulating names and stories like badges of honor. The pre-raid festivities start before the ships are even fully loaded. Mead appears from somewhere. Vikings had a talent for manifesting alcohol, and soon warriors are toasting everything from favorable winds to their favorite boots. The mood is electric. 3 months of dark winter followed by muddy spring has left everyone desperate for action and plunder. To the bear render, someone shouts, "May his rage clear our path." To Gunner's beard, "May it frighten our enemies into submission." To Eric's tongue, "May it lie us out of any trouble we can't fight through." Each toast gets more creative and ridiculous. By the time someone toasts to Thorvald's missing toe, may it, continue being missing. Everyone's laughing too hard to drink properly. This is the side of Viking culture Hollywood misses: the camaraderie, the dark humor, the way these men use laughter to face the very real possibility that half of them won't come home. Your Berserker brothers have their own pre-raid ritual. Ulf produces a pouch of the sacred mushrooms, but Ragnar shakes his head. "Not yet. We save the fury for when we need it. The sea journey requires clear heads." Instead, he brings out 4 matching arm rings, silver, twisted with iron, carved with Berserker runes. "We wear these until we return. If one falls, the others carry his ring home. The weight of it settles on your forearm like a shackle. This isn't just jewelry, it's a promise." These 3 men, violent and half mad as they are now your responsibility, and you're theirs, in a culture where loyalty matters more than life. This is serious magic. Jarl Eriksson arrives for the formal send-off, resplendent in his best armor and enough gold to outfit a small ship. His speech is what you'd expect: glory, wealth, favorable gods, sharp axes, cooperative victims. But his eyes find yours during the part about letting our enemies know Northern Fury still lives. And you understand, this isn't just a raid, it's a message to the Danes who've been sniffing around. We're not weak. We have berserkers. Fear us. The families arrive as final preparations wrap up. Wives, children, thralls, anyone with connections to the departing warriors. Some women wear expressions of studied indifference. Viking wives were tough as iron, while others can't hide their worry. A few young boys run between the warriors, begging for promises of treasure and stories. One woman, heavily pregnant, grabs her husband and whispers something that makes him go pale, despite his earlier bravado. You're surprised when a young woman approaches you directly. She's maybe 18, with the kind of beauty that starts feuds. Bear render, she says formally, but her eyes are warm. I ask the favor of your protection for my brother, Olaf. This is his first raid. Ah, young Olaf, the one you terrified at practice. You spot him trying to look fierce while obviously fighting seasickness, and the ship hasn't even launched. I'll watch him, you promise, and mean it. Berserkers might be dealers of death, but they're also protectors of their people. The girl rewards you with a smile that would launch 1,000 ships, then ties a small cloth favor around your arm. Great. Now you have to survive to return it. Historians still argue whether Viking raids were carefully planned affairs or crimes of opportunity. From what you're seeing, it's both. There's definitely a plan. Hit the Northumbrian coast, work south, avoid the new fortified towns, but flexible enough to pursue any opportunity that presents itself. The North Sea greets you like an old enemy, cold, gray, and actively trying to kill you. The moment the Raven's hunger clears the fjord's protection, waves start testing the ship's construction and your stomach's constitution. Around you, 30 warriors pull oars in rhythm while trying not to think about how much water is sloshing around their feet. Viking longships were marvels of engineering, but they were also barely glorified rowboats with delusions of grandeur. Pull, you lazy dogs! Hakon Seawolf roars from his position at the steering oar. My grandmother rows faster, and she's been dead 10 winters. Viking motivational speaking at its finest. The man has an entire vocabulary of creative insults involving various relatives and livestock, deployed strategically to keep spirits up and arms moving. You've discovered that rowing is absolutely miserable. Your enhanced berserker physique helps, but after 2 hours of fighting waves that seem personally offended by your presence, even supernatural strength has limits. The oar handle is already raising blisters through your calluses. Salt spray has found every cut and scrape from training, turning them into tiny torments. This is the part of Viking life the sagas conveniently skip. Navigation is handled by Hakon and his assistant, a grizzled old sailor missing one eye who everyone just calls Navigator. The mainstream historical fact that amazes modern people is that Vikings navigated using sunstones, crystals that could locate the sun through clouds, birds, and an intimate knowledge of currents and wave patterns. No GPS, no compass, just raw skill and the occasional prayer to Njord, god of the sea. Land fades, Navigator calls out, and everyone turns for one last look at home. The mountains shrink to bumps, then disappear entirely. You're now completely at the mercy of the sea, the gods, and Hakon's ability to find Northumbria without accidentally ending up in Iceland. The sleeping arrangements would violate every modern maritime safety regulation. At night, half the crew curls up between the rowing benches, while the other half keeps sailing. You're essentially spooning with sweaty Vikings on wet planks while the ship does its best impression of a mechanical bull. The quirky detail: Vikings often slept in two-man sleeping bags made from animal hide. Nothing builds warrior bonding like sharing body heat with someone who hasn't bathed properly in weeks. Bear render. Young Olaf crawls over during a rest shift, green-faced but determined. When will we know we're close to land? When Navigator starts looking excited, you answer, watching the old man sniff the air like a hunting dog. Or when we hit it, whichever comes first. Dark humor helps when you're one rogue wave away from drowning. Meals at sea are an adventure in lowered expectations. That rock-hard bread. Now it's rock-hard bread soaked in seawater. The dried fish manages to be both soggy and tough. Fresh water is rationed carefully. You get enough to survive, not enjoy. Some enterprising warrior has brought a cask of mead, which improves morale significantly until Hakon discovers it and confiscates it for emergencies. The emergency apparently occurs that very evening during the captain's watch. On the third day, the weather turns. What was merely unpleasant becomes actively terrifying as waves start cresting higher than the mast. The sail comes down fast. In these conditions, it would either tear or flip the ship. Everyone who isn't rowing is bailing water with whatever they can find. You use your helmet, scooping frantically while waves try to reclaim what you remove. Thor fights the serpent, someone shouts, referring to the myth where Thor battles the world serpent during storms. Lightning cracks across the sky as if in agreement. You're not particularly religious by modern standards, but when you're in a wooden boat during a North Sea storm, atheism becomes a luxury you can't afford. This is when you learn about Berserker sea duty. Ragnar grabs you and the other bears, dragging you to the mast. If she starts to break up, we hold her together, he shouts over the wind. Our strength might buy enough time to reach shore. The idea that 4 men, however strong, could hold a ship together through sheer muscle power seems optimistic, but you position yourself anyway. If nothing else, you'll have something to do besides panic. The storm passes as suddenly as it arrived, leaving everyone exhausted and soaked. Hakon surveys the damage. One oar snapped, various supplies washed overboard, and several warriors looking distinctly less enthusiastic about the raiding life. But the ship held, and you're still roughly heading in the right direction. Navigator claims he can smell land, though that might just be Gunner's feet. 2 days more, Hakon announces, after consulting with Navigator and the Sunstone. Then we remind the Northumbrians why their grandfathers built churches with thick walls. The mood shifts as land approaches. The misery of the voyage transforms into anticipation. Weapons get checked and rechecked. Whetstones come out to put final edges on already sharp blades. The younger warriors receive last minute advice that ranges from practical, shield wall means stay in the wall, to superstitious, never kill a man who's counting coins, bad luck. You and your Berserker brothers begin your own preparations. Small doses of the mushroom, not enough to trigger full rage, but sufficient to sharpen senses. Meditation exercises that would look bizarre to modern eyes, but help prepare your mind for voluntary madness. The bear inside stirs, sensing violence approaching like a shark scenting blood. Historians still argue whether Viking raids were primarily about wealth or territory. From your position, it's simpler. It's about proving you're alive. After months of darkness and weeks of dangerous sailing, the need to act, to take, to conquer becomes overwhelming. The coins and slaves are just keeping score. The Northumbrian coast materializes through morning fog like a promise of violence. Your first raid as a berserker begins with Navigator's excited cackle. He's found exactly where he intended, a stretch of shore below a wealthy monastery. The Raven's Hunger and her sister ships glide in on the dawn tide, silent as hunting wolves. 30 warriors crouch ready, and you feel the bear stirring in your chest, sensing what's to come. Shields and steel, boys, Hakon whispers, though his grin suggests he's anything but quiet in spirit. Rich monks await. The monastery of St. Bartholomew sits atop coastal cliffs, its stone tower visible even from the beach. The quirky historical detail. Monks often rang bells to warn of Viking raids, but this early, they're probably still at morning prayers. Their god is about to meet some competition. The mushrooms go down easier this time, your body recognizing the ritual. Ragnar watches you carefully as your brothers begin their transformation preparations. Remember, he says, painting warrior marks on your face with a mixture of ash and blood. The first time is always the hardest. Don't fight the bear, become the bear. The physical sensations start immediately. Colors sharpen until you can see individual leaves on distant trees. Your heartbeat thunders in your ears like war drums. The smell of your fellow warriors, sweat, leather, iron, and anticipation becomes overwhelming. But underneath it all, something else grows. Rage. Not the hot anger of an argument, but something deeper, older. The kind of fury that existed before humans had words for it. Form up, Hakon commands, and the warband moves as one. You're placed with your Berserker brothers at the front, shock troops designed to shatter whatever defense the Northumbrians can muster. Your regular clothes are gone, replaced by wolf pelts and ritual scarring. The morning air raises goosebumps on exposed skin, but you don't feel cold. You don't feel anything except the need to rend and tear. The charge up the cliff path happens in fragments. One moment you're jogging behind Ragnar, the next you're sprinting past him, foam flying from your mouth. Your axe, when did you draw Bonebiter, feels weightless. A monk appears at the monastery gate, his face transitioning from confusion to terror in the space of a heartbeat. He tries to bar the door, but you're already there, and the door explodes inward under your assault. What happens next isn't combat. It's barely controlled catastrophe. The bear has you now, fully and completely. Your vision out is red-tinged tunnel, focused only on movement. A figure in brown robes tries to run. Your axe finds his spine without conscious thought. Another monk swings a candlestick at your head. You catch it in your teeth and bite through the brass. The pain should be excruciating, but the berserker rage transforms it into fuel. The mainstream historical fact is that berserkers were often deployed as door breakers and line shatterers, their fury making them temporarily immune to pain and fear. What they don't tell you is the cost. Even in your rage state, some part of you watches in horror as your body commits acts of appalling violence. You're a passenger in your own flesh, watching the bears rampage through human eyes. The treasury, someone shouts, probably Eric, though voices sound strange when you're this deep in the fury. Your brothers harry you toward the stone building where monks are desperately trying to hide their valuables. Ulf hits the door first, his jaw unhinging as he literally bites through the lock mechanism. You follow, bone biter singing as it splits skulls and spills entrails across pristine monastery floors. The Northumbrian response is pathetic. A few armed peasants try to form a shield wall, but facing berserkers with farming tools is like trying to stop an avalanche with harsh language. You plow through them, barely noticing the spear that grazes your ribs or the sword that opens a gash on your thigh. Pain is for later. Pain is for humans. Right now, you're something else entirely. Inside the treasury, monks cower behind overturned tables. The human part of you, trapped deep inside, feels a flicker of pity. These aren't warriors, they're scholars and holy men who chose a life of peace. But the bear doesn't distinguish. Everything that moves is an enemy. Everything that breathes is a threat. Your axe rises and falls in terrible rhythm. Bear render. Enough. Ragnar's voice cuts through the rage like a blade. He's gripping your shoulders, his own transformation faded back to mostly human. The work is done. Come back to us. Around you, the monastery burns. Bodies litter the courtyard. Your fellow Vikings are already looting with professional efficiency, stuffing golden crosses and jeweled manuscripts into sacks. The return to humanity is agony. As the berserker fury fades, every wound makes itself known. Your mouth tastes of blood and brass. Your hands shake uncontrollably. The emotional weight of what you've just done, what the bear did using your body, crashes down like a physical burden. You drop to your knees, retching. First time is always rough, Ulf says, patting your back with surprising gentleness. His jaw is back in place, though bruised purple from the dislocation. You did well, didn't kill any of ours, which is better than my first raid. Historians still argue whether berserker rage was controllable or if warriors simply learned to aim themselves at enemies before transforming. From your experience, it's like riding a barely tamed predator. You can suggest a direction, but the beast goes where it wants. The aftermath of berserker rage feels like the world's worst hangover combined with existential dread. You sit on the monastery steps, watching your fellow Vikings systematically strip the place of anything valuable while trying to stop your hands from shaking. The transformation back to humanity is never clean. Fragments of the bear's consciousness linger like smoke in your mind, making you flinch at sudden movements. Drink, Ragnar orders, pressing a water skin into your trembling hands. It's not water, it's some kind of herbal mixture that tastes like fermented grass clippings but helps quiet the residual fury. The shakes pass, the memories, those you learn to live with. Around you, the raid's success is being tallied. Golden crosses, silver chalices, illuminated manuscripts that will fetch high prices from collectors who don't ask questions. Young Olaf staggers past carrying a reliquary almost as big as himself, grinning despite the arrow wound in his shoulder. He survived his first raid, barely, but that still counts. The quirky historical detail most people don't realize. Post-raid medical care was surprisingly sophisticated. Ivar the Healer, Vikings were very literal with their nicknames, moves through the wounded with practiced efficiency. He stitches cuts with horsehair, packs wounds with moss that has antimicrobial properties, and doses everyone with willow bark tea for pain. When he reaches you, his expression is carefully neutral. The bear rode you hard, he observes, examining the various wounds you don't remember receiving. These will scar pretty. He says it like it's a good thing. Scars are just victory receipts in Viking culture. The gash on your thigh needs 20 stitches. You don't remember getting it, but there's someone's tooth embedded in your forearm that definitely isn't yours. How many? You ask Ragnar quietly. It's the question every berserker asks after their first full transformation. 7 confirmed kills. 3 more probably won't survive their wounds, he replies. Efficient for a first rage, you stayed focused on enemies, which isn't always guaranteed. He shows you an old scar on his chest. My first time, I killed 2 monks, a donkey, and spent 10 minutes attacking a stone wall. The bear doesn't always discriminate. The slaves are the hardest part to process. Northumbrian peasants and surviving monks are chained together, destined for markets in Dublin or York. The mainstream historical fact is that Viking slavery, or thraldom, was a cornerstone of their economy. A good raid could set a warrior up for years. You watch a young woman, probably the priest's daughter, stumble past in chains, and your modern sensibilities war with your Viking pragmatism. The bear render feels guilt, Eric's serpent tongue observes, appearing at your elbow with his talent for being wherever gossip is born. Unusual for one of Odin's chosen. The bear feels nothing. You respond, trying to sound more certain than you feel. I simply adjust to the aftermath. Eric studies you with those 2 clever eyes. Well, adjust quickly. Hakon wants to hit 2 more sites before word spreads. Your bear will feed again before we see home. The ship loading is efficient chaos. Plunder goes in first, carefully packed to maximize space and minimize damage. The slaves go next, packed like sardines in the hold. Then supplies, because successful raiders still need to eat. Your share of the loot is already substantial, a small fortune in silver, a beautifully crafted sword, and inexplicably, a chess set made from walrus ivory. The bear apparently has expensive tastes, but it's the psychological aftermath that's hardest to navigate. Other warriors celebrate, passing around liberated communion wine and making increasingly crude jokes. You sit apart, trying to reconcile the scholarly monks you murdered with the victory everyone's celebrating. The bear doesn't care. It's already asleep, satisfied with the morning's violence. But the human part of you keeps replaying moments, the terror in that first monk's eyes, the way the candlestick bent between your teeth, the wet sound of bone biter finding flesh. It gets easier, Thorvald says, settling beside you with a grunt. Or maybe we just get harder. Either way, the weight lessens. He offers you a drinking horn filled with something that smells strong enough to strip paint. The gods gave you a gift, bear render. Using it honors them, even when it feels like dishonor to us. The philosophical implications of being a berserker are staggering. You're essentially a divine weapon, blessed by Odin to become a monster in battle. But you still have to live with yourself between transformations. Historians still argue whether berserkers were honored or feared in Viking society. From your experience, it's both simultaneously. Ship ready, Hakon bellows. Next target is a trading post, 15 miles south. Scouts say they have a garrison, 20 men, maybe 30. Real warriors this time, not just holy men with books. The crew cheers. After the easy slaughter at the monastery, they're eager for a real fight. You feel the bear stir at the promise of worthy opponents. Part of you is horrified at how quickly violence becomes normal, how easily you're adapting to this life of professional brutality. Young Olaf finds you as you board, his shoulder bandaged but spirits high. My sister will be pleased, he says shyly. I survived, and you watched over me as promised. He shows you a small silver cross he's keeping. For her, she likes pretty things. The innocence of it, a boy giving his sister jewelry paid for in blood, perfectly encapsulates Viking morality. They weren't evil by their standards, just operating in a world where violence was currency and mercy was weakness. You're learning to think the same way, and that might be the most terrifying transformation of all. The concept of fair division of plunder would make a modern economist weep with frustration. Back at the beached longships, Hakon oversees the distribution with the gravity of a judge and the math skills of someone who counts on their fingers. The system is deceptively complex, shares based on rank, special bonuses for first through the door, deductions for stupid behavior, and arguments about everything. Standard shares first, Hakon announces, while Eric Serpent-Tongue acts as record keeper, making marks on a wooden tally stick. The basic warrior's share is respectable, enough silver to buy a decent farm or a really good cow. Officers get double, Hakon gets triple, and the Jarl, who stayed home, gets a full fifth of everything. It's taxation with axes. Berserkers get danger pay, Ragnar announces, which starts the first argument. Danger pay is traditionally for warriors who take exceptional risks, but some argue that berserkers don't count because they're too rage-drunk to appreciate danger. The debate quickly devolves into creative insults about parentage and livestock. The quirky historical detail? Vikings had surprisingly democratic processes for major decisions. After sufficient arguing, they actually vote on the berserker pay issue. You win by a narrow margin, probably because everyone remembers watching you bite through a candlestick and nobody wants to argue with that level of crazy. Your personal haul is impressive. The base share plus danger pay, plus first through the door bonus, plus a special acknowledgement for exceptional savagery, that's actually a formal category, means you're suddenly wealthy by Viking standards. The silver alone could buy a small ship. The weapons and armor could outfit a war band. The chess set remains inexplicable but valuable. Now for the special items. Hakon continues, producing pieces that don't fit standard categories. A golden reliquary containing some saint's finger bones, a jeweled gospel that no one can read, but everyone agrees is pretty. A strange mechanical device that might be a clock or might be a torture device. Opinions vary. These items go to auction among the crew. It's capitalism at its most basic. Whoever wants it most and can pay for it gets it. Gunner Skullcrusher gets into a bidding war over a silver inlaid helmet that escalates until both parties are basically wagering their entire shares. He wins, but will be eating very basic food for months. The human cargo is another matter. Slaves are valued based on age, health, skills, and attractiveness. The young woman you noticed earlier, definitely the priest's daughter based on her literacy, is worth almost as much as a skilled craftsman. The mainstream historical fact that makes modern people uncomfortable is that Vikings were equal opportunity slavers. They didn't care about race or origin, just market value. Bear Render gets first pick of thralls, Hakon declares, which you weren't expecting. Apparently it's another Berserker privilege. You risk madness for the gods. You get perks. Everyone watches to see what you'll choose. Taking the priest's daughter would be expected. She's valuable and you're a young warrior. But something in her terrified eyes reminds you too much of your modern morality. I'll take my share in silver, you announce, which raises eyebrows. Passing on a valuable slave for mere money is unusual. Ragnar nods approvingly, though. Berserkers often avoid personal attachments that might interfere with their battle rage. The division continues through the afternoon. Everything is accounted for, from golden crosses to iron nails pried from monastery doors. Vikings waste nothing. Even the lead from the church roof has value. By evening, everyone knows exactly what they've earned and what they owe. Good raid, Thorvald concludes, counting his silver for the third time. Enough to expand my farm, maybe buy that meadow from old Bjorn's widow. The casual shift from violence to domestic planning is jarring. These are farmers and merchants who go raiding seasonally, not professional soldiers. The celebration that night is subdued by Viking standards. Success is toasted, the gods are thanked, but everyone knows this is just the beginning. Word of the monastery raid will spread. The next targets will be warned, defended. The easy plunder is gone. Now comes the real work. Tomorrow we hit Scarborough, Hakon announces. Walled town, proper garrison. They'll see us coming. He grins through his beard. Good. I was getting bored with monks. You're learning the economics of Viking raiding. It's not random pillaging. It's calculated resource extraction. Hit soft targets first to fund the expedition, then tackle harder objectives with better equipment and full bellies. Historians still argue whether Vikings were primarily raiders or traders, but from what you're seeing, They're both simultaneously. Young Olaf seeks you out again as the evening winds down. He's clutching a cup of pilfered communion wine and swaying slightly. My first raid, he says proudly. I'm a true warrior now, looking at his bandaged shoulder and boyish grin. You're struck by how young these warriors start. Olaf can't be more than 16, but he's already killed and been bloodied. In a few years, he'll either be dead or as scarred and pragmatic as the veterans. There's no middle ground in this life. You did well, you tell him, because he needs to hear it. Keep your shield high and stay clung to experienced men. Survival is the first victory. And the distribution complete, men settle into small groups. Some gamble their new wealth on dice games. Others discuss what they'll do with their shares, expand farms, buy livestock, maybe even commission a ship. The treasure is already transforming from blood money into dreams of prosperity. It's disturbingly normal. Winter in a Viking settlement is like being slowly buried alive in ice, darkness, and the smell of too many people in too small a space. You've survived the raiding season, barely, and now face a different kind of endurance test. The longhouse that seemed spacious in summer now feels like a prison, packed with warriors, families, thralls, and enough livestock to start a small farm. The dark months hit different when you're this far north. By December, the sun barely bothers showing up, managing maybe 4 hours of weak gray light that does nothing for anyone's mood. The quirky historical detail. Vikings suffered from seasonal depression just like modern Scandinavians, but their treatment was more aggressive, massive feasts, competitive drinking, and occasional ritualized violence to keep spirits up. The bear grows restless, Ragnar observes, watching you pace the longhouse like a caged predator. It's been 3 months since your last transformation, and the beast under your skin is getting irritable. Without regular outlets, Berserker rage can turn inward, manifesting as paranoia, aggression, and the overwhelming urge to bite something. The solution is Berserker winter training, essentially controlled violence to keep you functional. Every few days, you and your brothers trek to a cleared area where you can safely lose your minds. The mushrooms don't work as well in winter, something about the cold affecting potency, so achieving full transformation is harder. You spend hours in a frustrating state of almost rage, strong enough to splinter shields, but not enough to satisfy the bear. Daily life becomes an exercise in careful routine. Morning. Check the animals haven't frozen to death. Midday, eat the same preserved foods you've been eating for weeks. Afternoon, craft work, weapon maintenance, or storytelling. Evening, competitive drinking and board games that occasionally end in fistfights. Repeat until spring or insanity, whichever comes first. The storytelling is where Viking culture really shines. Skalds, poet warriors, hold court by the fire, recounting sagas that can last entire nights. The mainstream historical fact is that these oral traditions were incredibly complex, with specific meters and alliteration patterns. A good skald could hold a hall spellbound for hours, weaving tales of gods, heroes, and that time Gunnar accidentally married a troll, Your raid stories have already entered the rotation. Tell us about the candlestick, someone calls out, and the Scald launches into an increasingly embellished version where you bite through solid gold while fighting off 20 warriors single-handed. You'd correct him, but Viking culture values a good story over strict accuracy. The social dynamics of winter are fascinating. Crammed together for months, every small conflict threatens to explode. Strict social rules keep violence minimal, guest rights, honor codes, and the threat of exile for murder. But minimal, by Viking standards, still includes regular wrestling matches, formal duels, and the occasional drunken axe throwing contest. Women's roles become more visible in winter. While men spent summer raiding, women ran everything else: farms, trade, household management. Watching the Jarl's wife effectively govern the settlement while he plays war chief is a lesson in real power versus apparent power. She controls food distribution, manages disputes, and somehow keeps 50 Vikings from killing each other over stolen cheese. Bear Render, she addresses you one evening, which is unusual. High-status women rarely speak directly to berserkers. My husband values your strength, but strength without wisdom is just destruction. Learn to think beyond the rage. On its cryptic advice, but you're learning that Viking women often speak in riddles and metaphors. They're playing longer games than the men, thinking in years, while warriors think in raids. Historians still argue whether Viking society was more egalitarian than previously thought, and watching the subtle power dynamics suggests it was complex. The Yule celebrations provide welcome relief from winter monotony. 12 days of feasting, drinking, and ritual that make modern Christmas look restrained. The centerpiece is the Yule boar, a massive wild pig hunted specifically for the occasion, cooked whole, and consumed in an orgy of competitive eating. But Yule has darker edges. This is when the wild hunt rides, Odin leading dead warriors across the winter sky. Berserkers have special obligations during this time. You stand guard certain nights, watching for omens in the northern lights. The mushrooms work better during Yule, mystical reasons, apparently, allowing brief transformations that leave you exhausted but satisfied. One night, deep in your watch, you see them, or think you do. Shadowy riders crossing the aurora, led by a one-eyed figure on an eight-legged horse. The rational part of your mind says it's mushrooms and exhaustion, but your bear spirit recognizes its patron, and you drop to your knees in the snow, overwhelmed by divine presence. You saw them, Ragnar says later, noting your expression. The hunt. Not everyone does. Even among berserkers, the Allfather has marked you for something. Whether that's good or bad, he doesn't say. The political undercurrents of winter are treacherous, cooped up with nothing but time. People plot. You learn about alliances between farms, brewing feuds over summer insults, plans for next year's raids. The Danes haven't forgotten your monastery visits. Word is they're building defenses, hiring mercenaries, maybe even coordinating with other kingdoms. War is coming, Jarl Eriksson confides during a rare private moment. Not just raids, real war. The Danes unite against us. We need allies, or we need to strike first. He eyes you speculatively. Berserkers might tip the balance if you can control them. Spring arrives like a violent ex-lover, sudden, dramatic, and making everyone simultaneously excited and nervous. The ice breaks with sounds like Thor's hammer striking anvils, and then everyone pretends they weren't going completely insane from winter confinement. But this spring is different. The political tensions that simmered under winter's ice are boiling over into something that smells like war. The thing, yes, that's actually what they call it. Vikings were nothing if not literal, convenes on the first clear day. Every free man in the district gathers at the assembly grounds, a natural amphitheater where laws are made and conflicts theoretically resolved without bloodshed, theoretically being the key word, since you count at least 40 men wearing mail under their cloaks. The Danes mass at Hedeby, Jarl Eriksson announces, his voice carrying across the crowd. 300 warriors, maybe more. They say we've grown weak, that our raids last summer were the desperate gasps of dying wolves. He pauses for effect. They say our berserkers are nothing but old women in bear skins. The insult to your brotherhood produces exactly the reaction he intended. Ragnar actually grows fangs for a moment before controlling himself. Ulf's jaw dislocates with an audible pop. You feel your own bear stirring, offended by the very suggestion. Around you, men roar their outrage. Nobody insults Viking masculinity and lives to brag about it. But this is where Viking democracy gets interesting. Despite the rage, they actually debate. Gunnar Skullcrusher argues for immediate attack. Eric's serpent tongue suggests negotiation and gets called various unflattering names. Others propose alliances with neighboring jarls. The mainstream historical fact people forget is that Vikings loved legal procedure almost as much as violence. They'd argue technicalities while sharpening axes. I call for the home gang. A new voice interrupts. A stranger steps forward, tall, scarred, wearing enough gold to fund a small raid. I am Bjorn Ironside, speaking for Jarl Hakon of Hedeby. Your raids dishonored our territory. I challenge your champion. Let single combat decide whether you pay Weregild or we take it in blood. The crowd goes silent. Holmgang, judicial dueling, is serious business. It's legally binding, religiously sanctioned, and usually fatal. All eyes turn to you and your berserker brothers. Champions are typically chosen from among the elite warriors, and you don't get more elite than Odin's own madmen. Bearrender will stand for us, Jarl Eriksson declares, before anyone can volunteer. Politics at its finest. You're relatively new, so if you die, it's less of a loss than losing Ragnar, but you're also proven enough that victory would cement his authority. Unless the Danes fear to face a true berserker. Bjorn Ironside smiles like a man who's been hoping for exactly this. Tomorrow, dawn, let the gods judge who speaks truth. He produces his own mushrooms from a pouch. I too know the bear's path. We'll see whose fury runs deeper. Fantastic. Your first home gang is against another berserker. The odds of both participants surviving approach 0. The quirky historical detail? Holmgang had very specific rules, fought on a cloak or defined space, 3 shields each, first blood or death depending on terms. But berserker duels tend to ignore such niceties once the rage takes hold. The political maneuvering that night is intense. Various jarls approach Ericsson with alliance offers, sensing opportunity in the chaos. Your potential death or victory will shift regional power dynamics. Eric's serpent tongue works the crowd, placing bets and spreading rumors that you killed 10 men with your teeth. It was one candlestick, but why let truth interfere with good propaganda? Ragnar prepares you in the sacred grove. Ironside is old school, he explains, painting ritual marks with extra care. Trained by the Uppsala berserkers, they fight without restraint, seeking death as much as victory. You must be smarter. Use the bear. Don't become it entirely. How? You ask, checking Bonebiter's edge for the 100th time. Remember your anchors. Remember why you fight. The bear alone knows only rage. The man knows purpose. He produces the wooden bear carving from your chest. This was yours before the awakening. A daughter carved it. You have family waiting. The memory hits like cold water. A little girl, maybe 6, pressing the crude carving into your hands. For when you go Viking, Papa, so the bear protects you. And you don't remember her name, but the feeling remains. Love, fierce enough to rival any rage. The pre-duel negotiations are tense. Terms are set. To the death. No shields, because berserkers don't use them anyway. Weapons of choice allowed. The space is marked. A square of cloaks about 10 feet across. Leaving it means forfeit. Given berserker tendencies to chase opponents into the next kingdom, this might be optimistic. Both sides agree on the stakes. If you win, the Danes pay Weregild for their insults and acknowledge your raids as legitimate. If Ironside wins, your district pays triple Weregild and provides hostages. It's economics disguised as honor, but that's Viking diplomacy for you. The politics of being a berserker champion are more complex than you realized. You're not just fighting for personal glory. You're a living weapon in your Jarl's political arsenal. Your victory or death will ripple through alliance networks, affecting trade routes and raid targets for years. No pressure. Historians still argue whether berserker duels were performance or genuine supernatural combat. Standing here, feeling your bear wake as dawn approaches, you're pretty sure it's both. Tomorrow, you'll either secure your people's independence or die spectacularly trying. Given Viking priorities, both outcomes have their appeal. Dawn breaks like spilled blood across the sky, and you stand at the edge of the marked square, watching Bjorn Ironside perform his own transformation ritual. His method is different, more controlled, refined by years of practice. Where your rage feels like barely contained explosion, his builds like a fortress, stone by stone. The crowd forms a circle, equally eager and terrified to witness 2 berserkers unleashed. The mushrooms went down an hour ago, a heroic dose that would kill normal men. Your vision swims between human sight and something older, predator perception that tracks a heartbeats and fear scent. Ironside's eyes have already gone full wolf gold, and his breathing sounds like a forge bellows. This is going to be ugly. Begin, Jarl Ericsson shouts, and time shatters into fragments. Ironside moves first, faster than anything that size should move. His axe, a massive two-hander that would challenge normal men to lift, whistles through air where your head was a heartbeat before. You're already spinning, Bonebiter seeking his ribs, but he's not there either. Two berserkers in full rage fighting is like watching natural disasters try to kill each other. The mainstream historical fact is that berserker duels often ended in mutual death. You understand why as Ironside's axe catches your shoulder, shearing through leather and flesh like paper. You don't feel pain. The bear doesn't acknowledge such human weaknesses, but you smell your own blood, and it drives the rage deeper. Your response is pure instinct. Bonebiter forgotten. You launch yourself at his throat, with teeth bared. He meets you halfway, and you collide with the sound of mountains falling. His teeth find your ear. Goodbye, left earlobe. But you've got your fangs in his shoulder, bearing down with jaw pressure that could crack bones. The crowd screams, horror, excitement. Who knows? You're beyond caring about audiences. There's only the enemy, the rage, and the desperate need to rend. Ironside throws you off with berserker strength, but you land on all fours, already charging back. Weapons are abandoned. This is pure animal savagery now. You clash again at the square's center. His fingers find your eyes, trying to blind. Your knee finds his groin, proving berserkers aren't immune to all pain. You both go down, rolling in dirt that's quickly becoming mud from blood loss. The watching Vikings have to scramble back as you roll past the cloak boundaries, technically forfeit. But nobody's brave enough to tell two berserk warriors they're disqualified. Something shifts in the combat. Maybe it's exhaustion, maybe divine intervention, but human thoughts start creeping through the rage. The wooden bear carving, pressed against your chest, reminds you of purpose beyond destruction. You have a daughter, a family, a life that exists outside this moment of violence. Ironside seems to sense the change. His attacks become desperate, seeking the kill before you can fully integrate human control with berserker power. But that's his mistake. Pure rage has limits. Controlled fury, directed by human intelligence, that's truly terrifying. You catch his next attack, using his momentum to throw him. He lands hard, and you're on him before he can recover. Bonebiter is back in your hand. When did you grab it? Pressed against his throat. For a moment, you both freeze, two berserkers poised on the edge of mutual annihilation. Yield, you growl, the word barely human, but comprehensible. His eyes widen. Berserkers don't ask for yields. They kill until killed. But you're offering something unprecedented. Victory without death. Honor without annihilation. It's so unexpected that his rage falters. Humanity creeping back into wolf gold eyes. I yield, he gasps, and the crowd explodes. The political implications hit immediately. You've won, securing your people's position, but by showing mercy, you've also changed the game. Berserkers who can control their rage enough to spare opponents are far more valuable than simple, mad dog killers. Every Jarl in attendance is recalculating your worth. The quirky historical detail, showing mercy in Holmgang, could create debt bonds stronger than victory. Ironside owes you his life now, a debt that extends to his entire clan. You've just turned potential enemies into complicated allies. Ragnar pounds your back, ow, grinning through his beard. The bear with wisdom, he says. Odin smiles on innovation. The transformation back to humanity is gentler this time, controlled rather than crash landing. You're still bleeding from a dozen wounds, missing an earlobe, and pretty sure several ribs are cracked, but you're alive, victorious, and have somehow advanced berserker practice by several centuries in a single fight. Ironside, helped to his feet by his men, approaches carefully. I've never felt the rage controlled like that, he admits. How? You touch the wooden bear under your shirt. Remember what makes you human. Use the beast. Don't become it. It sounds like mystic wisdom, but really you're just trying not to pass out from blood loss. The aftermath is swift. The Danes acknowledge your victory, pay the Weregild, and most surprisingly, several approach Jarl Eriksson about alliance possibilities. A Jarl with thinking berserkers is apparently worth befriending. You've turned a blood feud into a political opportunity through controlled violence. Very Viking. As Ivar the healer stitches you back together, again, you realize you've found a balance most berserkers never achieve. The bear is still there, always ready, but it serves you now rather than consuming you. You can walk between worlds, human and monster, warrior and father, destruction and creation. The sun sets on a changed political landscape. Wars will still come, raids will still launch, but your controlled fury has shown a different path. Berserkers don't have to be rabid dogs, dying young in puddles of blood and madness. They can be weapons wielded with precision, fury tempered by wisdom. Your daughter's carving saved more than your life today. It might have saved your soul. The longhouse settles into evening quiet, wounds tended and victory toasted. Your fellow warriors treat you differently now, still careful, but with less fear and more respect. You've proven that berserkers can be more than just pointed at enemies and released. As sleep finally claims you, the bear rests peacefully in your chest, no longer a barely controlled monster, but an integrated part of who you are. You dream not of blood and battle, but of home, of teaching your daughter to carve better bears, of raids where mercy matters as much as might. The age of thoughtless rage is ending. You've helped birth something new, warriors who can think through their fury, who can choose when to be human and when to be monster. It's a small change in the grand sweep of history, but revolutions often start with single moments of unexpected mercy. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new politics, new battles. But tonight, you rest as something unprecedented, a berserker at peace with his nature, a bear who remembers being human. The skalds will struggle to capture it in verse. This warrior who bites through candlesticks but spares fallen enemies, who channels divine rage but keeps his humanity. You drift deeper into sleep, the wooden bear warm against your chest, wondering what songs they'll sing of the berserker who chose not to kill. In a world that values violence, perhaps the greatest strength is knowing when not to use it. The bear agrees, rumbling contentedly as consciousness fades. Even monsters can evolve, given the right anchor to humanity.